about student retention and student motivation. And so we've been sending weekly emails to students with title, summaries of what you did, what next, progress bar, and what parts of this email are useful or not. And we can rapidly do A/B tests or really ABCDE testing to understand all of these things. Turns out sending students emails with the deadlines, that actually depresses student participation. Somewhat surprising. Reminding students of deadlines actually is not a good idea for some reason. But if you remind them of the deadlines and tell them what they did, it's like send an email saying, good job, you logged in, you did these homeworks, and send them a progress bar. That actually significantly increases student participation. I actually have more interesting examples than this that go more in depth into deeper pedagogical examples, but these are the sorts of things that we've been doing. And then lastly, I want to share with you, a couple thoughts. Right? All of you are current Stanford students, and most of you will be graduating in the near future. And some of you are wondering what to do after you graduate. As a professor here, having been here for 10 years, over the last 10 years, I've pretty consistently advised students, not to join the big boring companies, but to either stay in academia, which I think is a very worthy thing to do, or to join a startup. And the reason I say these things to students is I think this is where you will learn the most and where you have the most impact on the world. So Coursera today, we're about 40 people, and we support 2.3 million students. What this means is that each Coursera employee, if you wake up one day and if you write a piece of code and you push it out the next morning, you can suddenly change the lives of hundreds of thousands of students. So let me give you a sense of the numbers and the responsibilities that this entails, because I think writing software that, this isn't like some, so I guess I've traveled around the US a lot, right? It turns out that people outside California have a funny idea of Silicon Valley. I was at CES a couple of weeks ago in Vegas, and elsewhere in East Coast and so on. When I talk to people and I say, I work in tech in Silicon Valley, sometimes you get, the person will have a frown and say, oh, you're working in Silicon Valley, you must be working on the next mobile social photo sharing app. And sadly, I think that is true for a lot of Silicon Valley companies, but I think this is Stanford, and we are better than that, you are better than that. And when you graduate from Stanford, whatever you do, be it Coursera or something else, I hope you do something meaningful with your life, because you have a hard-earned, very valuable set of skills that can have a big impact on the world. So let me give you a sense of the numbers and the way we think about it. I talked about peer grading, which is where students get to do this work and then they grade each other's work. So let's say that one morning you wake up and you come up with an idea to change peer grading just for one class, right? And then we rarely do things just for one class. We actually almost never do. We should try to do things for at least 10 or 20 classes. Let's say you just do it for one class. Let's say it's a small class, right? It's only 10,000 students. My class was 100,000. Let's say only 10,000 students do this homework. It's a small class. Each of the students might spend 10 hours working on your peer grading assignment or whatever you happen to implement. And so 10,000 students times 10 hours of homework is 100,000 hours. A full-time engineer works about 2,000 hours a year, it turns out. And so this 100,000 hours that you just got people to spend, divided by 2,000 hours a year, that's what, 50 years of a working professional's it's 50 years of a full-time engineer. It's basically one person's entire working life. So on that Saturday morning when you had an idea, you spent an hour hacking something, you push the production, you just used up 50 years. You just used up one person's lifetime just like that. And depending on whether you did it well or you did it poorly, you just wasted one person's life, or you just make someone spend their life well. And that's sort of that's the responsibility of when you're doing things that students are engaged with to this extent. When you have so many deeply committed, deeply motivated, deeply engaged students that spend hours trying to learn from whatever system you almost on a whim feel like pushing out. Stanford. The numbers we work with almost don't make sense. Stanford University, I've been a professor for a long time, so Stanford University has 20,000 students. Because we have 2 million students, our product prioritization is roughly, if it affects less than 50,000 students, we just don't have the resources to do it. So what that means is that as a Coursera engineer, for those of you that if you end up joining us, you will be making decisions that say, you know, if this affects every single student on the Stanford campus 2.5 times over, that's just too small to be interesting. We just don't have the resources to do that. Not because 50,000 students are not interesting, but because we have bigger problems and bigger fish to fry. We're still a very young company, so you know, if for people joining us now, you'd be like one of the first 50 employees. So we're still very young. And I want to share with you kind of one last thought, which is, I always thought Stanford is the most amazing place in the world, and I think to a large extent it is. I find that I am inspired by the people around me. So Daphne Collar, my co-founder, is my office, and sharing her office is awesome. I learned a lot from her. And showing up every day at work and hanging out with people like Frank and Brennan is just amazing. And you know, the stuff I learned from these guys, I guess. I learned a lot about server architecture from Frank, about security from Brennan, and being around amazing people inspires me. For the last 10 years of my life, I thought that Stanford would be the place I find most inspiring, because frankly, Stanford is just full of amazing people. Coursera is even better. It turns out every single Silicon Valley company thinks they hire in the top 10% because they interview 10 people and they hire one and they think it's just mathematically not possible, right, for everyone to be hiring only in the top 10%. Since I've been around here for a while, I actually see the entire distribution of Stanford students, and the population at Coursera is not the top 10% of Stanford. I think it's roughly the top 20% of Stanford. So I think it's not easy to get a job at Coursera, but for the people that join us, you know, every day the people at Coursera that I get to hang out with are even more amazing as the amazing people that I get to hang out with at Stanford. You know, I'm not aware of any. If you look at all the big boring companies, you know which ones. It's way easier to get a job at those big boring companies than at Coursera. But that means that, you know, if for those of you that end up working with us, hopefully you'll be inspired and learn from that and do things that really change the face of education as well.